It was probably out in the middle of the river. I just saw a fireball and then it was just gone. So I haven't seen anything since they hit the river, but it was a CRJ and a helicopter that hit. I would say maybe a half-mile off the approach.
Those were the words from air traffic control in the nation's capital after an American Airlines jet collided with the military Black Hawk helicopter last night. It happened just outside of Reagan National Airport there.
Officials say American Eagle Flight 5342, carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members from Wichita, Kansas. The helicopter, which was on a training flight, had 3 soldiers on board. At least 28 bodies have now been recovered this morning. Joining us this morning, retired Marine Colonel Mark Kansian, Senior Advisor with the International Security Program, to give us some more insight on this incident. Colonel, it's a pleasure to have you with us. I wish we had a different topic this morning. As you are hearing, just as we are in real time, this exercise mission with the Black Hawk helicopter, this is not an unusual circumstance where you have a crowded, restricted airspace where you have passenger airlines and military aircraft.
Well, that's right. You have to keep in mind that Washington is a particularly crowded airspace. With helicopters, we have not just the usual weather helicopters and police helicopters and private helicopters, but we have all of these military helicopters. Each one of the military services has helicopters to support its missions. Of course, everybody knows about the Marine helicopter to support the president. The Army has helicopters down at Fort Belvoir to conduct national security missions and homeland security missions. The Air Force has a few helicopters. It's a very busy airspace, unusually busy.
Colonel, we heard from a lot of officials there, but one thing we really didn't hear from is on the military side of things. Okay, so we know that the NTSB is going to lead the investigation. On the military side, is there anything different, or do they follow the NTSB's orders? What does it look like on the military side of things as we begin to unravel what happened?
I think there'll be parallel investigations. The military investigates all of its own crashes. Since this one involved a civilian aircraft, I think they'll be working together to figure out what happened.
When it comes to the military, we were just speaking with our own pilot and transportation expert, Mackay Beeler, just 10, 15 minutes ago. Colonel, when it comes to the military flying in like near Reagan National, does the ATC, the air traffic control, even though you got military working on their own frequencies, do they also listen to the same tower, the same ATC as American Airlines? And so they, in fact, are in control of the communication, whether it's civilian or whether it's military aircraft?
Well, there's no question that they all come under the same air traffic control because it's a very busy airspace. And keep in mind that almost all the aircraft go up and down the Potomac River. That keeps them from flying over neighborhoods, keeps the noise down, also keeps them from flying over sensitive areas in Washington, D.C. So not only do you have a lot of traffic, but they're all moving along the same corridor. So yes, they're under the same control.
Colonel, when we talk about a training exercise, right, as you mentioned, it's not uncommon to see Black Hawk helicopters flying up and down the Potomac River. It's a crowded airspace. We have military, we have federal officials in those helicopters. But when we say training exercise, it's vague. What would they be training for? Is it just training with the flight path along the Potomac, or is there something else? Because training exercise, it's vague.
Well, we'll find out exactly what it was. But the Army has a variety of tasks in Washington, D.C. They move VIPs around, for example. They have some response forces that in case of an emergency that they can move to parts of D.C. And it may have just been a question of getting some flight time also for the pilots. As I say, they come out of Fort Belvoir down south of the city. But there are lots of missions that national security aircraft perform in the Washington, D.C. area. And they do training for that because you don't want them to do a real world mission for the first time without having trained for it ahead of time.
Colonel, I'm curious. I know it could be days, weeks before we find more information from the NTSB investigation. But if you were to speculate on military bases that are nearby, within flying distance, and I'm talking about all the branches of the military, even probably the Coast Guard, what do you expect leaders of pilots that would typically be about to take off and practice runs today, what do you expect those conversations to look like on these military bases based off what's going on right now?
Well, there's no question that the pilots are fully briefed and fully connected to the air traffic control system. I think that after this incident, there's going to be a lot of scrutiny about exactly what happened. And I'm sure that the commanders are telling all of their, flight commanders, their pilots, to be extra careful, to make sure that they are checking in with air traffic control. It's possible they might even ground some of the aircraft, until we understand better what happens. I have not heard that has happened, but very often they'll have a stand down for a day to review safety procedures when there's a situation like this.
All right, again, retired Marine Corps Colonel Mark Cansian joining us here to provide some insight on the military side of things. Colonel, we appreciate your insight this morning. We'll have you back in our 9 o'clock hour to continue coverage of this. You're watching Queen City News now as we continue to cover this breaking news: an American airliner's jet colliding with a Black Hawk helicopter. We know, unfortunately, there are no survivors. You're looking at the live recovery mission there as they try to reunite loved ones with the bodies of those who were on both that flight and that helicopter. Again, watching Queen City News now. We'll be right back after the break.